everybody, what's happening? I am Tommy, and you are on the lifeboat. And I have with me mod extraordinaire and former woman that used to hang out at women's federal prisons. We'll get into that, see the real story. Kristen, welcome to the boat. We've never done this, have we?
Nope. Howdy.
That's, you know what? You've been around a really long time. It was really funny because we were setting this up today, and I thought, you know, the first time we did this, and Johnny was like, "You've never had her on your show." I'm like, "I'm pretty sure I have." He's like, "No, you haven't." I have. He's like, "You have not had her on your show." And, you know, for a guy that used to have a really good memory, it's not very good anymore. Nancy Wagner, how are you? Jane Aldrich. There's Kristen and Melinda. Chase the Heat, Taylor Miller, Annabelle Black Boots. Good to have you here. So tonight, I'm going to ask you questions for your line of work. That's probably going to be weird, huh?
I get to chill now. I don't have to ask the questions.
You're on the hot seat. I'm the world's toughest interviewer.
That doesn't sound as chill. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't back that up. Actually, there's just no truth. I thought it sounded cool though, but there's really absolutely no truth to that. Hey, Christy Nicole, good to have you here. I'm glad you're here. Hey, Cliff and Ferguson, welcome aboard. Cindy G, glad you're here. So, you, how long did you work at the prison?
A year. I was there for my practicum in my last year of grad school.
I remember when they very rarely did they like to put women in the men's prison, but there aren't usually enough guys doing that job. So just about every year we'd get one or two of them.
I had at least two colleagues that were assigned to the men's prison nearby.
Did they scare the hell out of them?
Their comment was, it was interesting.
Yeah, I always felt really bad for them. Like the dental hygienist as well. You know, people that they normally work a really straight job, right? And now they're just they're still doing the same job, but they're just surrounded by people that are frightening. The last prison I was at had a dental hygienist that looked like she was stepped off a video on MTV. Right, just a terrible idea. And I remember the first time I went in thinking to myself, "Oh man, this girl has probably been offended by more people than anybody else." But I think most guys are actually pretty respectful. There's certain groups that aren't. I'll tell you what I'd like you to do, because I distinctly remember the first time I walked into a prison. That's a moment that if I live to be 1,000, I will never forget. Do you remember the first time you walked in there?
Oh yeah. Different probably, because I was pretty sure they were going to let me leave, but that's different. I remember meeting with my supervisor who was in charge of assigning practicum assignments, and I'm sitting down with him and he hands me this brochure and he's like, "Yeah, this is a good place. It's, over in Fort Worth. You'll get a lot of experience. It's mainly ladies there with a lot of, drug abuse issues." And I don't know, it never occurred to me to say, "No, I'm not into that. No, go send me somewhere else." It just never occurred to me. But I had to meet the person who was going to be my supervisor at the front. And I had to put all my stuff through an x-ray machine. I had to leave my phone in my car. I think I actually had to run back to my car to put it back in my car, which didn't even occur to me. Go through the metal detector. I think the sound of the doors closing.
Yeah.
That sticks out.
Sticks out. That's funny that that's the same thing that gets us. That, and every once in a while, like even if you've been around, every once in a while they'll take you someplace that looks so different, right? They'll take you someplace where it just doesn't look like every other prison, and it because of that, prison is routine, right? And every one of those buildings looks exactly alike. So if you're in Texas or you're in California or you're in Nebraska, right, the prisons all look exactly the same. And then you get to like Atlanta or Lompoc or Lewisburg, where these things were built in the 30s, and they're just,
those are old. Yeah,
it looks like the Green Mile. It's a little intimidating. Did you work one-on-one or groups?
Both.
Good God. See, they don't do guy groups in the feds.
They don't.
No, the guys will tear each other apart, because you're asking people to, and In fact, I don't think a lot of people even sit down with the counselors and give them the time of day. They
Well,
will push you to go up there, but you'd hear guys just complain about it all the time. I was like, good Lord, when's the last time you talked to a woman? Like I'll go up there just cause, they also say no perfume. They had big
they have
lips.
that rule in women's prison too.
Yeah.
I think I forgot it once, and one of the people I was seeing looked at me like she was real distracted the whole hour, and it was only at the end she was like, "You smell really good," and I was like, "Oh no."
Yeah. There's a scent called Michael, right?
Oh,
And I had there was a woman that I dated for a period of time, and that's all she wore. And the first time I went to prison, they brought in a woman to do my parole. It's like the pre-interview. Literally, you sit in an office and you give them all the information, and she hands that to the people, and then I walk around and sit in the chair. But I sat down in her little office, and she had bathed in it
oh
that
no,
morning, and
she
she
forgot to
had to
shower.
be, she had to have been 75, right? And the shock of, the last person that smelled like this was 22 years old, 23 years old, or something like that. And looking at this woman, I remember thinking to myself, that's it. Like Michael's never going to ever smell good again. It's kind of a bummer,
Well,
kind
smell
of a
is so
bummer.
strongly linked to memory. Like I'm pretty sure I still can remember the smell of the building I worked in, because it was actually, so where I worked was on an Air Force base or a Joint Naval Reserve base, and the building with the medical center was originally the hospital for the people who lived on base. And then in like the 90s, they converted it into a prison, and they built the housing around it and stuff like that. So the
Wow. So where was
hospital
this?
building was really old. FMC Carswell in Fort Worth.
Carswell. You know what? There's so many federal prisons in Texas. It's crazy. That's one I had not heard of. But so at one time it was there are three initials for what those facilities are called. Something medical.
Yeah.
It sounds like MDC, but it is a medical unit. It's a medical prison.
Yeah,
And there's
Federal
a
Medical
bunch of
Center.
them. There you go.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. FDC. Thank you. I knew it was something like that. I knew it was something like that. How scary was the first woman you sat down with? And I don't mean the person, but this is kind of baptism by fire, wasn't it?
The first person I sat down alone in a room with, I was actually doing like full psychological testing with. So like an IQ test, like
Holy crap.
the whole 9 yards. This isn't like a 1 hour interview. It takes like 3 or 4 hours to do that.
Yeah.
But actually, I remember her being like the nicest lady. Like she was super sweet.
You got lucky? Yeah, that's probably what
I think
happened.
she
You got
was
lucky.
happy to not be on the unit, honestly, is what I look back on it and I think a lot about now. Because I mean, the building that's got like different floors for psych and med surge and stuff like that, it's kind of like it's within the prison, but it's separate from being on the unit. So from what I was told, it's not as chaotic,
Right.
right? Because people are there for specific reasons. And then if they're not, they're kind of, escorted away.
Shuffled back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a floor. I mean, I think it was downstairs that the shoe was. There was also another part that was like higher security. There was only 24 ladies there. They also had a satellite camp too. And they had Gen Pop. They had RDAP. They had like every level of security in there. And they kept the women who were on death row for federal there too.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you know what? I've never thought about that. There's got to be some women on federal death row. That's scary. The guys were across the street from the prison I was at, but the death house was. It doesn't make any sense. But they keep them at the USP. But where I was across the street is where they keep the death house, and it's just a creepy building. Like when you walk around outside, you look over it and think, "Yee." That was the one Timothy McVeigh walked into. It's just a frightening looking little death house out in the middle of nowhere. I think probably one of the other reasons that she was the nicest person in the world is
I'm sure they picked her for me.
No, I'll tell you something. When you're really green, right? Like you're coming in and having not done any of this before, you don't have the hardness, right? If you're an inmate and you're sitting down across from somebody, there's a really decent chance you're the 50th, right? Therapist because they do run them through and people quit like you wouldn't believe. And the ones that are good get taken out and promoted. Like I stayed at one prison for 6 years, which is a long time in the feds. But I
Yeah.
did 6 years at one prison, and I'm not joking. I probably went through 30,
Yeah, that makes sense.
therapists, and they've been shuffled around so much that when you go in and you sit down, you know that they don't really like you. Like before you even get started, this is kind of work. It's part of the day. So I would imagine I was always really excited to talk to the people that were new because this is an exciting thing. I bet you were. I
They
bet
talk
the
to you like a
adrenaline was
person,
pumping.
right?
Yeah.
I
So
mean, the part
Cindy
that
asks, "What program were you finishing up?" Finish that thought first, but then we're going to answer Cindy's question.
I mean, the most adrenaline I remember getting was just the fact that I didn't have keys and I couldn't get out of anywhere because, like, technically a practicum student, you work there, but you're technically a volunteer. So I can't go anywhere unless my
Right.
supervisor takes me there. So I was always really cognizant of where she was.
Wow. The so yeah, that's terrifying. So when people hit the
I just
deuces,
stay on
did
my
you
little
go?
floor.
Yeah, when they hit the deuces, you stayed there, or
Yeah,
did you go?
yeah. We went
Oh,
on
that's
lockdown
crazy.
at least once when I was there because out like in the main hallway, a lady had like climbed up onto some kind of vent or overpass and she was threatening to jump and one of the psychologists had to go out and talk her down, but the rest of us had to. I happened to already be in the psych floor office. So
Right.
they just said, we're not going anywhere for a while. Just, I don't know, finish up
Yeah.
your work or something.
So, so what program were you finishing up at that moment?
It was my master's in counseling psychology.
Okay. So, and they had you actually like baptism by fire. You're sitting down and actually,
Yeah, that was literally the
jumping right into it.
first client I ever had, ever had.
I'll tell you
That
what, though, that's
that is
awesome.
the the foundation for everything I became later as a counselor started there.
So here's a question for you. Now that you're out in the normal world, right?
And it's not that
I
new.
would imagine that I would imagine that behind the walls, it's a far more interesting from a job standpoint, right? I mean, it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah, you're working on these are people um, that are almost archetypes, at least in the male side of it. The they're everybody that got screwed up somehow in youth is right there, and usually, uh, depending on how long they've been down, some of these people will actually start talking about that. Never in a group. I've never once seen a group, but
A
I
lot
opened
of
up a lot.
trauma. A lot
Yeah.
of trauma. The psych services department that I worked for, they had it set up pretty cool, at least from what I've heard later from the way it's set up other places. They kind of set up like this track system where they would have that you could, sign up for or apply for that had like a trauma track. It was like all groups and education around trauma. They had one specifically around like values, one specifically around like victim impact, stuff like that. Um,
What an amazing idea.
yeah, I think they tried to model it after like, I don't know, like a major, like a college major, only it's in mental health, like different
Nice.
areas of it. But
Did you participate in the assisting with RDAP?
I did actually, my direct supervisor, the person that I met with once a week, she was an RDAP psychologist. So a lot of what I did had to do with RDAP. Like I assisted with groups and I ran one of those mandatory drug education groups that it's
Right?
like
Yes, I
prerequisite
know it.
before you can
It's the
get into
40 hour.
RDAP.
It's the 40-hour program. It's called the
Yeah, yeah,
40-hour program.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
like 24, 25 when I was teaching that.
I, I'm not joking you, Kristen, Melinda. I have probably taken that 15 times, 20 times. Every time you get to a new yard, that the people will go, yeah, you haven't finished your 40-hour, and you're like, yeah, I have. Like
Like
I would
8
bring in
times.
papers and show them. No, but you know something? RDAP would be the one place in a prison where they will do group programs, because if you don't go to group in RDAP, you're not getting the time off.
Oh yeah, we had a
Um,
wait list for people trying to get into RDAP. I mean, yeah, because you can get time off. It looks good, and also they're at least where I worked, they're housed completely separately too.
yep, Yeah.
And I think the rooms are nicer actually, or as far as nice, whatever you call nice
Well,
in
we
that
had
environment.
pillows. We had
Yeah.
pillows in my unit. Like that's in the feds, there are no pillows. So if you go to RDAPA, like I remember walking in and looking at the bed and going, "Holy hell, that's a pillow." I recognize that thing.
Try to stay clean, you get a pillow.
Sadly, I was there 3 days.
I can remember you
I didn't
saying
do
that on
too
a
well.
show.
Yeah, I didn't make it 3 days. I acted like such a jackwagon. On a gallon of hooch I bought from Casper actually. But yeah, I just acted like a fool. You know what happened though? They lied to me right up until the finish line, and I'm sure you probably dealt with this if you did RDAP. Once an inmate realizes that I got okey doped, they're not giving me any time off of this. Right now, I got guys in there who are on the waiting list. So me doing this program is keeping that dude from going home. Right? That's a bad idea. And
Yeah.
it causes a lot, at least in the men's prison, it causes a bunch of friction,
Yeah.
So I figured I would get out with style. And I did. I
remember there
why
were
no pillow?
Yeah.
Because they suck.
I assume it's just some kind of optics way of saying we're not going to invest in these people, like why should they be comfortable? I that's what I always assumed it was.
I think
Something nasty like that.
I think what I've been told in the feds is that they really had a difficult time finding pillows that were flame resistant, right?
Okay, that makes
Apparently,
sense.
apparently pillows burn really easy. So every once in a while you'd get to a yard and they would have pillows, but there would be 6 of them, right? Because it was made out of the same material as the mattress. So it's like this thick green plastic.
Like barely
it gets
a pillow.
very brittle. Oh God, just the worst thing in the world. But yeah, that's what you're working with if you had one.
Pillows are very flammable. I accidentally caught one on fire when I was 15.
Yeah, no, pillows are the worst. That's actually why they so accidentally were you playing with matches?
It was an accident. I had a candle burning and I fell asleep.
Nice.
It was absolutely an
nice.
accident.
I did that with a leather jacket in college. I passed out.
Leather was that flammable?
Well, apparently it is. I've passed out in the dorm smoking a cigar, and it was crazy because I just sort of slid back, but it was actually flaming up. So I woke up to a guy going like this, I'm like slamming his. So I tackled him. I thought, this guy's punching me for some reason. And he must have done a hell of a job. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you come to and he's swinging at you. Didn't seem like it didn't feel like he was on my team at all. I would imagine there's a lot less violence in the women's prison, but the difference violence, because my understanding is relationships among the ladies are far more accepted, right?
Yeah,
so in the men's prison that doesn't fly. If there are guys doing it, they got to do it under the radar.
There's a lot more psychological violence is what I call it. Like women will be nasty to each other in not so obvious ways. They'll ostracize each other. They'll exclude each other. They'll kind of psychologically torture each other, actually.
So like junior high and high school.
Any worse or better. Yeah, kind of. Actually, like the weirdest thing to me was when I found out that there's a bell system. Like at least where I worked, there was a little beat that sounds like a bell in a high school. In the high school I went to, that lets you know when people can move about. And that, I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that.
Yeah, that's normally the the RDAP programs and all those, and they have to do it because rec moves are usually 3 rec moves in a row, right? So if you're outside, you're just doing something. If there's not a tone to let you know, then a lot of guys would just walk in circles for 3 hours and not show up wherever they were supposed to be. Not always burdened by deep thought. You know what I mean? The fellas. It's funny. The guys act like adolescent idiots as well. I mean, for real, it's like high school in a men's prison. There's all this testosterone and all of these guys punching each other. And it's just that sort of stupid mentality. And I remember reading a book.
Women act like women in a high school.
Right. Yeah,
And I would
they
hear about it, like the venting and stuff like that sometimes in session. And
destroy reputations,
yeah,
right? Call them sluts and whores and all of that stuff.
yeah.
I have a daughter and I have a son, and I was always way more freaked out by how the girls fought. You know what I mean? Like Spanky'd punch a guy in the face, and right? I'd get a phone call, but it was very easy to work out, you know. And when my daughter would have problems,
Well,
um,
getting punched is a little more straightforward. Not that it's
I'd rather
better.
have it. I'd
It's
rather have
just
it.
you know what it is. You know when to well, maybe not when, but you know what to expect.
I'm still going to go with I would much rather be punched in the face than have somebody try to destroy you reputation style.
That's true.
Hey, it's look who it is. Hello, Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay.
Welcome. Yeah, she says prison was vicious. My understanding is that there's a decent amount of gang banging. There's a decent amount of tattooing. It's very much like a men's prison, only more estrogen.
Yeah, I saw more neck tattoos than I've seen anywhere else in my whole life.
And you see them raw. Does that not freak you out a little bit? Like I remember when I first got there and you'd see something and you're like, that thing got done 2 days ago. I mean, it's
Yeah.
red as hell, you know, and they walk in with no tattoos. Same with the guys, right? They walk in with nothing. And 5-6 days later, they got 2 sleeves and they're red and irritated. They don't write anybody up. They just don't care about stuff like that unless they catch you in the act.
Right.
And yeah, the neck tattoo, very popular in the men's prison as well. Yeah, the in RDAP, you probably had a lot less people making wine.
Less that, I mean, if that happened,
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of it. And usually the counselors that ran that program, they didn't really like hold much back from, like, they didn't try to shield me from what was
right,
going on. But they also, at least where I worked, the psychologist over it and the counselors over it, they worked really hard about how they screened people
right.
before they let them in. Like, they worked
Checks out.
really hard to make sure it was people that like legitimately wanted to be there for the program as much as they could anyway. And they
And if
weren't.
you had a 113 or a 112 shot on your record within the last 3 years, they're not letting you anywhere near that building. That would be manufacturing of an intoxicant. That would be, I believe, that's a 112, and a 113 is a misuse of substances, and that's a really broad. It's like you took somebody's pills, right? Somebody cheeked their pills at Pill Line, and you bought those. That's one way you can get it. But if they find you with dope of any kind, you're going to get a 113. If you
Oddly enough,
fail a P test.
like I hear a lot about how, you know, what they will and won't prescribe. Maybe because it was a medical center, or maybe because it was someone had a very specific medical condition. But I did know somebody that was prescribed opiates there. But they were taking her off of them. So
It's because it's a medical facility. So
yeah.
Victorville, there's only a couple of them in the feds. I mean, there's a bunch of them, but there's only a couple of them where normal people can walk. Right. A lot of these places that have medical, there's PCs, you know, but they kind of have to have a medical facility for guys that are really doing it. So Victorville, California was one of them. And yeah, they weren't even messed up about it. Like I remember going in there and the guy said to me, he looked at my file and just went, "Oh, I was going to write you a prescription for pain pills." He's like, "But yeah," he's like, "You'll just, you'll go nuts on those." And I said, "Nah, you know, I've been trying to get that under control." He's like, "We'll try it for a week. See if you get caught cheeking them." You know, they just,
Wow.
yeah, they didn't care much.
Just like, whatever. I think
So
one of the more, sorry, go on.
Yeah, what did they frown on girl relationships?
Well, officially, yes.
Officially.
Yeah. Officially, yes. But I think in practice, it was just kind of like, don't get caught and don't make more trouble for the COs. Like at the end of the day, that was ultimately what it was.
That's what it always comes down to in the men's prison too. You know, the easiest thing in the world in a men's prison is to go up to the guard and tell him what things you're going to do wrong on his shift, right? Mm-hmm. And if he goes, "Hey, I don't want you doing that," you have figured out that this probably isn't your guy. But you know, every time we just go up and say to him, "Hey, we're going to be moonshining 112. Is that a problem on your shift?" You know, we'll make sure nobody sees you. we're looking out for your boss. We're not this lets us look for your boss instead of you. And, but 9 out of 10 of them will go, no chance. But the older guys, they'd go, yeah, do something about the smell, maybe cut up an onion. They really are doing time. I mean, do you get that feeling? You're in there for 8 hours, so are they, right?
Yeah.
The only difference
at
is
the
you're going home.
time, back then I still smoked cigarettes and I couldn't smoke all day. Like back then they still had like a smoking room for staff, but I would have had to get like a person with keys to take me there, and it would have been a whole big thing. So I think what I did back then is I just wore a nicotine patch to work all day.
You know what? I was going to ask you.
Home.
No joke. I was going to say, did you go with the patch or the gum?
I did. I used the patch.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's a long day of not smoking. Most of the men that work in there chew tobacco. And
that makes sense.
I think it's for that reason. Although the vape, right around the time I was leaving, there would be COs in the unit vaping.
Oh, really?
Blowing out huge clouds of smoke, and nobody ever said anything to them. It's what kind of funny. There are some state joints that are actually selling disposable vapes because they don't want people smoking. Yeah, it's really insane. Some of the things that they do in places around the country.
Back then, they were calling them e-cigarettes. They were just starting to get to be big again, but you couldn't really find them very many places.
Yeah, e-cigarettes.
Yeah, they were calling them e-cigs.
Yeah. 2 questions. Do many women get visits from their children? And what happens if a woman comes in prego?
A lot of them do, and they want to. If they can get visits from their children, a lot of women kind of live for them, but it's like a mixed thing. Like they want to see them, but at the same time, like if you imagine then you have to go away and not see them anymore, that's really painful. We did have ladies that were incarcerated who were pregnant. When I worked there, I knew of at least one lady who they had to like take out to an outside medical facility to give birth. Yep. And I think one of the more disturbing things I learned is that they have to actually shackle them to their bed while they're in labor, which
they do.
Just kind of floored me. Because I mean, you're going to run off while you're in labor?
It gets worse.
If any of y'all have ever been in labor, or if you get an epidural, you really can't.
Right. and it gets actually way worse. So when I was trying to become an EMT, you have to do your rotation very much like you were doing in the prison. I had to do a stint in an emergency room, right? And you're supposed to hit all of these different parts of the hospital so that you get an opportunity to see different things that you may encounter while riding ambulance. And one of the things is you either put in 72 hours in OBGYN, right? Or you see a childbirth. And if you see a childbirth, you can go home immediately afterwards. But that 72-hour thing, because no woman is going to, hey, this is Tommy. He'd like to stare at your vagina for the next, you cool with that? And they, no woman says, yeah, bring 4 guys in. That would be great. The female inmates don't have that option. So we went in about 4 deep. It was a Hispanic woman. I felt so bad for her. I really did. I just felt horrible. She had one hand to the, to the railing. And honestly, I think I came closer to passing out watching that than anything else. Honestly, that was the only one that really floored me. I remember looking at the mask I had on and it was doing this one. I was like, holy hell, I think I'm hyperventilating.
I think like that was one of the things that like shook me hardest, I think. I mean, especially now, because at that time I hadn't had a child, but like I've given birth now and I remember what contractions are like, and just the idea of not being able to move.
Oh yeah.
I don't care what you did to be put in prison.
They've come around recently. The U.S. has made some strides in this. There's actually there are some women's prisons that have nurseries, so that at least in the very early days, the mother has an opportunity to bond with the child. Because again, like when the woman that gave birth at the hospital that I was at, she had 48 hours with that kid.
Yeah.
And then they separate him, and that to me was always very, very difficult. But you know what? I separated from my son. I separated from everybody that I loved. It's kind of part of that It's the biggest reason, right? If you happen to be catching this video, it's the biggest reason not to go to prison. No joke.
Yeah.
If you end up getting sober in there, it's not gonna be you that you fixate on. It's going to be what you're doing to the people that you care about, and that it's a tough way to do time. You know, you were saying that for the people who get visits, they live for it. I've done a decent amount of prison in both ways. When I had married the woman that was an attorney, when I had married my second wife, she used to come. She would fly to Arizona and see me, if not every weekend, every other weekend. Like, she was into it, and it was just, I mean, without fail, you know. And you get very accustomed to sitting down next to the person that you really care about, and it really is how you do time. You're living for that next visit. The trouble is, like, the next time I came in, there was a vacuum, right? There was it wasn't just that I was doing time. I was doing time alone. And you really begin to fixate and focus on that. And so my advice to guys coming in, I used to say, you know, unless you are just really, really head over heels, this is the most important woman in the world to you, then you should probably just tell her to kick rocks. I mean, it's the humane thing to do. It really is. It's the humane thing to do.
It was
it
was a big deal psychologically to, like, if they had like a shorter sentence, to keep some kind of contact with the outside world, to kind of stay motivated, to not mess up too much and get more time to try to do things the best they could.
Yep.
And so I think there were so many women that came in, and I think they handed them antidepressants as soon as they walked in the door, practically.
Absolutely.
Not literally, but it seemed like that.
Everybody gets put on them.
Almost everybody that was assigned to me, like for individual, told me that when they first got there, they didn't want to get out of bed. They didn't want to move. They're just either crying all the time or just can't move. And like, I think that's probably how I'd react to, honestly.
Well, there's definitely a darkness that first comes over, but you know, people tell you all the time, if you've done prison time and you're open about it with people, the number of times someone would says to me, "I'd die. I couldn't do it. There's no way I would die. I couldn't do it." And of course you could, right? Everybody says I couldn't do it. I used to say that.
I wouldn't.
You find yourself there. No, neither would I. Sammy, the pilot program that they had gave the women, I think, 5 or 6 weeks, so that at least there was something there. And I don't know how it's working out. I actually saw it on the internet. Somebody was bragging about it. Tommy told us about the suicide watch. Yeah, I don't give a crap anymore. Now we just say whatever we want. The suicide watch, do they have the same thing for women's prison?
They do. It has pretty much the exact same guidelines, the exact same setup, the exact same requirements. I have a pretty distinct memory of like the aprons and stuff, or whatever you want to call them, that they use. Like, they take all the regular clothes. There's no sheets. There's no nothing in there. I remember them getting a delivery of them to psych services. And I remember the forensic psychologist, she had to like test all the stuff. And I remember she was like trying to like pull threads out with her teeth. And she got out like the tiniest little thread. And she was like, "Oh, we got to send these back. They could do something with the thread."
Well, they
like
will
the
take
thread.
it apart. Yeah, no, they'll take it apart.
They're serious about that.
They have to be. I mean, inmates are not like any other people. It's almost fascinating, right? They cut a tree down at a prison I was at, an old tree, and it was making the sidewalk buckle, right, on the prison yard. It also had maybe 15 or 20 squirrels that lived in it. And this guy that had been doing time on the yard forever was complaining about it ahead of time. He's like, "Man, that's a home for a lot of." He went ape shit. I mean, he lost it. So when they cut the tree down, he decided he was going to destroy his cell. And he did. And they did this one. Like, he was so out of control that their idea was, he's going to wear himself out and fall asleep, at which point we're going to go in there and handcuff him. But he took the bunk beds apart. Like, you want to tell me how the hell you disassemble a welded bunk bed? But he did. He got everything in there.
You have to be really determined and really upset. But
it was weird because they had a toilet in there that was not made of metal. It's a very old prison, and
it wasn't metal.
he busted. That's one of the reasons that they didn't want to go in on him, was because he could pick up that porcelain.
Yeah, that would be bad.
He ended up actually horrifically scarring one of the cops that went in to get him. Bad.
I think people develop super strength, and different things happen to people when you put them in cages. That's what I think.
Yeah. You know what? No one is supposed to be in there. No. Right? Honestly. And I don't mean I needed to be put in prison. Right?
I mean, it's not like a natural human.
But it's not a natural thing
to be in a space that small. I mean, I think like the office I'm in at my house, which isn't big, I think it's bigger than any living space I saw there.
Guaranteed, because the federal cells all look exactly alike, and they're all shaped like the state of Nevada. Right? They've got the wall has to come in at an angle, right, to take care of what they call the pipe chase. If you've never seen it, people, that is where all the pipes for both cells, right, because there's a pipe chase between each sets of two cells. Okay. It's kind of how they put them together. But other than that, you're looking at about 12 and a half to 13 feet long. Right? It's about all you're going to get. And the width wise, maybe 8 feet. And it'll vary a little bit. The older prisons, they have Victorville had cells that were like this wide. I'm not kidding you at all. They had cells that the bunk was 2 or 3 inches from the wall.
I'm claustrophobic, so that makes me shudder.
Yeah, I'm claustrophobic too. Horrifying.
I got vicarious claustrophobia. Like one thing that they are supposed to do, I don't know if it always happens this way, but one thing that they were supposed to do is every time a woman was put in the SHU, in the special housing unit, or solitary is what it is, they're supposed to have someone from psych services go do an assessment within 14 days to make sure they're not losing it, basically. Right. And one time, one of the psychologists that was in charge of that, she said, "Oh, Miss Kettler, because that was my name then. Do you want to come down with me and like see what it's like?" Because basically, anytime they did anything, they'd say, "Hey, you want to come with? Like, you're a newbie, you want to see stuff." So, okay, sure. But they didn't let her in. They didn't let us in. Like, there's a CO standing there the whole time, and she's basically talking to this lady through a slot in the door. Like, you're trying to assess someone's mental status through a slot in the door.
Yep.
And I remember thinking about this, and my head flashed back to the tour I got when I first went for my interview, and there was an unused and empty cell of that size. And I remember seeing that, and I was just like, yeah, not breaking too many laws here.
Yeah. two guys, right? 2 guys sharing that with all of their possessions. It's what could go wrong. The talking through the door thing. So like if you go to the special management unit, every time you talk to a doctor, right? Unless you are strapped down to a gurney.
A proper exam of somebody through a slot in a door.
You don't. You really don't.
That sticks with me. Like it's been, this was like 2011, 2012, but some of this stuff sticks with me.
Yeah, I was in there at that time too. What's disturbing too, like I got written up at Lewisburg for basically they said I threatened staff, right? And all I was doing, because after you've done 500 of these right through the door, because every time you get to a new place, they come up and they go, "Hey, how are you doing today, Mr. Miller?" You're like, "Great."
Not well.
Right? Yeah, killing it. This is fantastic. And they go through a series of questions, and it's the same questions every single time. And after you've done it 500 times, I'm not joking. It's like, it's so repetitive. When was the last time you had a solid bowel movement? About 3 weeks before I came to prison. Right? And you try to get these people to laugh or do anything else. But the final question is, do you want to hurt yourself? And I would say, no, I don't want to hurt myself. Do you want to hurt anybody else? So I said to this woman, "Well, you're starting to piss me off with all these stupid questions." And I laughed like I did it. Yeah, it was never meant to be intimidating or anything else. But she went running right.
She didn't have a sense of humor.
No, she left at home apparently because I got written up for that, and I got written up for threatening staff.
I guess it's hard to read the person's sense of humor through the slot in the door too.
Yeah, that's legit. But I had been cracking jokes from the very start. Hold on one second. Look at this. Women would randomly scream in the yard that they were psyching out. Huh. Had their hands behind their back so they could get cuffed. That's absolutely crazy.
So where I worked, there was what you would call an inpatient psychiatric floor, which basically is like the prison equivalent of what an inpatient psych hospital in the world is supposed to be. And that
Someone
may
stopping by every couple of hours or whatever to look at them type of thing.
that's mainly a lot of psychotic episodes, like people hearing and seeing stuff that's not there. People really don't have much contact with reality anymore. But I kind of wonder, like, obviously some people have that as a condition and that's
Yeah.
something that they have. But I mean, there's studies that show if you stick a person alone in a room too long, that will happen.
Right.
So I wonder about that sometimes.
The ADX in Florence, Colorado. Everybody talks about that prison because they build it up to be the most the nastiest prison in the world in terms of you're not going to see anybody. It's isolation. And I knew 3 guys that went through and then got released. These were people who were being punished there, not like terrorists who were going to be there forever. But I knew a guy that did 8 years, and he was my cellmate, and he was batshit crazy. I mean, he was out there, and he was in the middle of a lawsuit. Then they were going to pay him. I mean, he was definitely going to get paid on it because they've actually determined that it is cruel and unusual punishment to keep people in solitary confinement for half a decade or a decade. But they just happily paid these guys, and they continue to leave them in there. You know, they'd rather settle it. And but I mean, what do you do with people who are so dangerous, right? That a regular prison isn't good enough. You know. Those people exist.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you counsel any women on death row?
I did not personally. They decided I was too much of a newbie for that, but I did know that one of the forensic psychs, that the psychologist that did counsel a woman on death row, and she would come back up and talk about it. And that was a really sad story, actually, because I think that lady was really, really sick when she committed the crime that got her incarcerated. And that was kind of, I think, her take on it. Like if there was ever a case of someone who really didn't know what reality was and what was going on when they did what they did, it would have been her. But I think she still ended up being executed. So
yeah,
she was allowed to have knitting needles. Like once when she was properly medicated and had support and had someone talking to her like a human, she was fine.
Yeah,
like she was still in the highest security portion, but like never any problems from that lady.
Don't you think that's most of them?
Yeah, actually.
I mean,
the weirdest thing is that I think about a lot is, so I worked there. That was like my unpaid work. That's how I learned to be a counselor. Right. And then my first full-time job out in the free world was at a community mental health center, which is like people who don't have any money, have no health insurance, coming out of the hospital, going into the hospital. And nobody ever shoved me into a wall in the women's prison. I did get shoved into a wall in the community clinic. So nice. I don't know.
Nice. Checks out, right? More dangerous on the other side of the wall. You know, that checks out. I love this comment. You can't understand someone's mental state while they're caged like an animal. They asked me in intake if I wanted to hurt myself. I said, not yet. Yeah. The other thing that's sad is if they start to get, like, if they get you in the crosshairs, right? If they get you in the crosshairs, the things that they can do to you through paperwork, right? I've told the story on here a bunch of times, but they came down and said, you know, we're shipping you to a medical yard. And I'm like, no, you're not. I'm this close, right? I'm about to get shipped to what the home yard. The last 6 months, they're supposed to send you close to home. I'm like, no, I'm almost out. You're not sending, because nobody ever comes back from those hospitals, right? It's a dangerous place. And I said, I'm not going out there. And they said my refusal for treatment, right, for what they said I had, meant I was suicidal. And I'm like, no.
That's a little bit of a stretch.
I said, what I'm afraid is you guys will kill me if I go over there. But they just wrote it up, and I ended up in the gown for over a month because I would not sign the paper. And no joke at all. I was going to sign the paper. I was so bummed out. It just sucked. You were going
to be happy to sign the paper.
Yeah, I was ready. And it had just gotten to that point. And the warden, who I had never seen, right? The warden from the prison, I'd never seen him before. He came up and opened the food slot, right? And just shoved through my clothing, my khakis. And he said, they're going to come up and ask you to sign that one more time. He said, if you tell them no, they'll ship you back across the street. I was like, love it. Right? Love it. And then I came back on the yard like this with, I looked like I had been on the island with Wilson.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't get
that's
a
what you look
razor.
like. You
Hey,
don't
I
have
got
access to
three
much.
showers. I got 3 showers in a month. And that was Thanksgiving, Christmas, and
Oh,
New
Merry
Year's.
Christmas. You can have
Yeah,
a
I got
shower.
all 3 holidays on the watch. To be technical, I think the day they brought me into the watch was Thanksgiving. So I ate Thanksgiving meal in a Barney Rubble suit. Didn't enjoy it much.
What bums me
Lindsay's,
out is that that's not what it's for. Like, me as, like, a psychology, like, a counseling person, that bugs me because that's not what it's for. It's for people who are suicidal, right?
right? That's what it
That
should be
bothers me.
for.
It
Well,
feels like a
and
misuse.
so we had My Brother's Keeper, the program where
Mhm.
inmates work the suicide
They
watch
did
program.
something similar with the
Yeah,
women.
and I had that job. That's the greatest job in the feds. Like it's a great job. You have to go to a training and all of that, but they pay you $1 an hour, and I
Everyone had
promise
wanted
you,
that job
that's
or the Unicore job, which there
yeah.
was a phone, like a call center for something,
Oh wow,
which I got a kick out
that's
of. Like,
crazy.
I don't remember what it was a call center for, but I got a kick out of thinking like, hey, if you call customer service, you might be getting one of my clients.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Lindsay says, I woke up naked in a cell with a paper gown once after getting arrested, blacked out. It was terrible. I was in there for days and didn't even know what I said to get in there. It's crazy. If you get the wrong people, there are folks who are just dicks. I was in a jail
Yeah.
once, and everything you did was based on the number on the door. Right? I was in the shoe. Odd cells would shower Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Even would go Tuesday,
Yeah.
Thursday, and Saturday. And every single night at midnight, they moved me from the odd to the even cell. And this went on forever. Like they just weren't going to let me make a phone call. They weren't going to let me take a shower. They were bent out of shape
Yeah,
because
they will
I
do
had a
that.
relationship with my attorney, and
If you get on their bad side, they
they'll
will do
do.
that. And when I started there, I was really, really naive to how people are treated. Like, I think I remember the first time a lady told me about the way that guards toss the cells,
Oh
and it
yeah,
just, like, in, like, my brain, I was like, "Why, though? Why would you do that? If you have to search something, why do you have to rip everything up? Like, you can just look." Like,
yeah.
just it didn't occur to me, but
It's what. Here's how it goes down. When they do the big shakedowns, like after a
mhm,
fight, or they think there's a knife on the yard, they're freaking out, they're
mhm.
looking for dope. They're going to search every cell in the
When it's
prison one
frenzied.
day.
Yeah.
And those days, they trash those cells. They just pull everything on the ground. Like they open the books and throw your pictures around, just complete and utter disrespect. But the guys that are in the unit, your unit cop is supposed to search 5 cells a day, right? And the computer is supposed to tell him which 5 cells picked at random. That
Okay.
way he's not playing favoritism, and the camera's going to see where the guy's going or whatever. But that guard has to live in that unit, right, with us.
Yeah.
And he's going to be in there at that particular prison. Those guys worked 12-hour shifts. So he's going to
Yeah.
be there half of the day every day. And so he doesn't want to get stabbed. He just wants to go home too. So they would go in and say, the guy would say to me, "Hey man, do you got anything in there that's contraband?" And like I had tattoo needles. I would put them in an envelope and write on the outside of them in huge letters,
So I
"Tattoo
can
needle."
find them easily.
Yeah, so
They
that
don't
so
have
that they
to
don't stick themselves. Because
destroy
my
everything.
big fear is if he
That's
sticks his
polite.
hand in there and
It's
it
very
pricks,
polite.
he's going to kill me, right? He's going to beat me like a pinata. But it becomes a game. It's kind of funny. They came in one day and they cut the water off, right? So I go over and I had just taken a leak and I went to flush and nothing. And I looked at my cellmate. I'm like, dude, they're coming, right? They're coming right now. And we had a bag of wine and there's nowhere to put it. You know what I mean? You're not going to. So they're coming up the stairs and it was like this stealthy crap. It was during a lockdown, but
Oh, that's
most of
where
them
they
were
put the
already in the
water.
unit.
Okay. So you can't flush
But
it
I
out.
took the plastic chair, those little plastic chairs that you get 2 of. I just happened to throw a chair over it. So it was sitting in between the 2 chairs and they tossed that cell for 40 minutes, man. Moved the chairs around, did all that, and never found it. It was absolutely a miracle. It really was. Yeah, Lindsay, So it's very much like men's prison. It sounds like the guards are so mean in prison. They call the women bitches and sluts. Yeah, the guys need to walk a thin line, right? Because they're about every 3 or 4 years a guard gets killed, right? And when it happens, it's a really bad thing. They will just take it out on the inmates for a good year or two. But that balance of knowing that these guys got nothing to do all day long, but think of ways that they could hurt you.
Yeah.
Just keep it real. These guys are spending the rest of their life in prison. What deterrent is there, right? You tear down a picture of his wife who he only sees in a visiting room. Trust and believe he doesn't care, right? He's going to get you.
And he has all the time in the world to be creative about what he's going to do.
Correct.
And think about it.
I've always been amazed by what you can cut out of a bunk. You would move from one cell to another, and you'd go in there, and there's literally like a knife with a hilt and everything else cut out of the bed, and it's usually spray painted with an orange circle around it. So if it isn't, you got to go down and get the cop and go, "Hey, man, obviously I didn't do this, right? Obviously I'm not the one that did this." So they come up and do the and get the spray can and throw a little circle around the outside of the bastard. And the reason being, obviously, I don't want to catch a shot. They call that in women's prison too?
Yes, they call them shots. I actually forgot what they're really called. What are they? That's all anybody ever called them. Written up, I think, is what my supervisor
A write-up is what most state joints call it. I was always pretty freaked out. Like when I got to the feds and they said it's called a shot, and the what was the other one? Call outs, right?
Cop outs.
Yeah, cop outs.
Cop outs are what, at least where we were.
Cop out is how you communicate with.
Yeah, to be put in a program. Like that was actually one of my like busy jobs, like between seeing people, was go through all of the stacks and stacks of like requests we got. Like I want to be in RDAP, I want to be in this, I want to be in that. Like we had wait lists and we didn't have enough staff or time for people. So but we tried to give some kind of response.
Right.
So I'm like the little, like, oh, I'm going to send back a sheet of coping skills. And now I look back and I think, oh, that was stupid.
You know what though? Hey, on the bright side, at least you handled the process, because in the guy's prison, you send the cop out back, the odds that you're actually going to get that thing sent back to you with any kind of satisfaction at all is slim and none.
That was the kind of thing I did when they were on lockdown. I would go through all of the cop outs and try to write things back.
Well, it saves a lot of time, because if not, then it becomes the BP form. BP8, BP9, BP10, BP11, BP12,
that job
13
to make less work.
It makes a lot less work.
There's a lot of things like this that like I'll hear about now, like just about the process of how federal prison works, and then I'll think back and it puts something in perspective differently that like I was asked to do or wasn't allowed to do or had to do a certain way, that it didn't occur to me at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure that almost everything they do in there is very well designed to keep the animals under control. I've talked about it a lot, over the years, but in a men's prison, they want the white guys hating the black guys, right? They want the Mexican folks divided at least in half so that they're all beefing with each other, because then they don't get together and get organized and start talking about trying to go over the wall, right? Or anything like that. Timothy Glass says, on another subject, I'd like to ask about the New Orleans prison break. I'll be honest with you, man.
I just saw the headline about that.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Anytime that many people, right? Normally a prison break is not, it's one or two guys. There were a lot of people that got out on that. I would imagine that they had help from the inside. That would be my guess. I would imagine we're going to find out one way or the other somewhere along the line. But it's kind of frightening. You know what I mean? Even as a guy that went to prison a few times, Tari, like I don't root for them when they're out. When they're out, I want them to get caught, and I know that may sound
they're not
awful.
Being rehabilitated in there. That's the problem. Is there's not enough. Like they're not being helped to like be happier, healthier people. And I say this as someone who tried to help people be happier, healthier people, but there weren't enough of us. So like if you put somebody out that's the opposite of a happy, healthy person, like with no any support, it's probably not going to end very well.
I think that everything they do is just designed to bring the person back, right? I mean, that's the recidivism rate is so high that if they were to try any other type, right, any other kind of intervention would get a better result than the one that they're doing now. But they want them to come back. It's job security. It keeps the little bureaucracy kind of going. Sad, but I believe that the deck is stacked intentionally to do that. In a woman's prison, I would assume that the feeding, the animals is on the same schedule. So like 5 o'clock in the morning, right? That's usually when breakfast starts at like 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Especially if they have you locked in the shoe, they'll bring you breakfast at 4:30.
Yeah. The ladies would tell me a little bit about the food sometimes. They would tell me about like, oh, my friend who works in the kitchen, like she showed me the thing and it said it had the expiration date was like 5 years ago. And this other thing said not for human consumption.
That's the one you see all the time. And you know what? People think we're joking when we say that, but it will say USDA grade D. Right?
I didn't even know there was a grade D.
Yeah, not for human consumption. Apparently, like C grade gets sold to Alpo, right? It ends up in dog food. So the fact that the next rung down ends up getting cooked, and some of the guys that cook in the kitchen can make that stuff taste good. They really can. They can whip some stuff together.
People get creative. People get inventive. Seasoning makes a big difference.
Good God, yes. Yep. Did you ever feel like you were at a disadvantage because of the ratio of how many inmates there were to guards?
On the floor I worked, and I rarely saw a CO actually, which I didn't think anything of at the time. Maybe because I was just too young and stupid to worry about it. But I think I saw a CO up there once, and she looked at me and she was like, "Do you work here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a practice student." She's like, "Are you old enough to work here?"
Thank God they sent you to a woman's prison. For real, it would have been wouldn't have been a great fit if they had sent you to the other ones. Oh my God, I thought the food was good. You know something? You were in the state.
Where you are.
No, you were in the state. So I did a state rip, and they had they were growing food directly. I mean, we had our own garden. They were raising.
Cool.
So yeah, everything that we were eating was really fresh. Cool. It was actually good food.
That's a cool program.
Well, and they told us the feds were going to be better. That's the crap you hear your whole life. Oh, you should have done a federal crime, right? That's the easy time.
Well, I've never worked in a state prison, but I know a lot of people that have been in state prison, and it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe it's men's state prisons. They sound pretty scary to me, but that's Texas. I don't know if that makes a difference.
Do you think that they are set up for failure? Yeah, they absolutely are set up for failure. It's by design. That's sad but true. That's the job security, right? It's the other example I love to use because it's the largest bureaucracy that we have would be the war on drugs, right?
I would agree.
We can't win it, but we can fund the hell out of it, right? The only thing we spend more money on is the defense of the country. So this is the second largest amount of money that we waste. None of those people want to lose their jobs, right? They all want to be able to continue to spend this money and play these games. But everything is designed to keep us going back and making cool uniforms that they can put on everybody that's trying to, we made uniforms for the Israelis. It wasn't just the United States. If you were fighting anywhere, you probably had somebody in prison make your uniform.
Wow.
Right. Or if you were at a fancy dinner, we made those too.
Wow.
Why, thank you, Jim Webster. It's a very, very kind thing to say, man. I appreciate the hell out of you. Yeah, Jim.
I don't know, but sorry, go on.
No.
I don't know what the stats are now, but at the time I worked there, 56% of the women incarcerated there, it was because of a drug charge.
Oh, yeah.
The next one down the list is like
domestic
fraud,
violence,
stuff like that.
Yeah, the DV's a lot.
Mail fraud.
Yeah, well, you were in the Fed, so that's going to be, it takes a lot of crimes off the table, right? Because there would only have been women who did federal offenses. Mm-hmm. So most violent crimes aren't going to pop up on federal stuff unless you're taking a person across state lines to to hurt them. It's federal crimes. We have a very unusual system in this country. We really do.
We do.
We have two separate systems, both broken to beat hell, cruising along at the. That's absolutely awful. Makes no sense.
What I thought then, and I think even more now, is that it did feel like, I mean, it does feel like a losing battle if you're a person who's trying to work in psych services or trying to work helping in the actual rehabilitation of people, because it just feels like there are so few of us to so many people who need something, is what it felt like. And like a large portion of the staff was people like me who were not paid, right? Like actually, technically I was paying to work there because it was part of my education.
And you're probably the only people there that care. If you do any kind of a stretch, and Lindsay'd probably back me up on this, but you can watch. It doesn't matter what they do there. It could be a prison guard, it could be a counselor, it could be a teacher, but you'll watch them come in and they're ready to hook up the entire system. They're going to save these people, and they believe they can rehabilitate people, and it's a very short period of time where you can watch the light go out of them.
I was super earnest. I really was. Like, I wanted to stay and work there, actually. Like, I applied for a job once I finished my practicum there, but I didn't even like get to the interview portion. Like, I just got back like a bureaucratic stamp. You're not qualified yet. And my supervisor was bummed because she was like, I think you're overqualified, but it's okay.
You know what? It's amazing though. You got out of there and you managed to, I'm telling you, it knocks the edge off of a lot of people. You can watch these people who come in really loving what they do. And, 3 years into this, they're phoning it in. They don't want to be there. Like when you go down for your counseling session, you walk in and they're like, if you don't want to be here today, sign line 3. Like they're not even making an effort, right? You can sign that and go to the gym if you want. Doesn't matter, means nothing.
I think I stayed pretty earnest the whole time. Like
there were a couple of people that did. They probably not a coincidence. They were women. Most of the guys. The other thing, the guys tend to come from prison guards, and the women tend to come from the street. You know what I mean? Guys who start to work their way up through they can apply to become a counselor, and that happens a lot. I watched that take place too. It's a bad system. It's most of the guys that we had in the feds would get they were coming back from war. The first job that they'll offer you when you come back. Yeah, I mean, what could go wrong? Right? I mean, people that just went through combat and now you're going to lock them in a room with a bunch of convicts. I've told the story before, but when I was at Victorville, I was in the SHU, which is right next to the parking lot. They paint the windows so you can't look out. But we heard, loud bang, knew what it was. We figured they shot from the tower. It was a guard who drove in the morning and couldn't face walking in to go to work. And he put his service piece in his mouth and took off the top of his head. And within a month, I was still in the same SHU. Another guy did it. That's a tough way to make a living. Working inside of that, you probably were able to remain kind of.
You kind of have to be on edge a lot of the time, but you stop realizing you're on edge all the time. Like it's just how you operate.
Cindy G asks, because I have mentioned that there really are not a lot of programs in the feds. They will tell you there are. If you look it up on the internet, it will. Like my ex-wife would say, I can't believe you're not signing up for this, this, and this. I'm like, babe, none of that. None of that is happening. Like whatever they tell you, welding programs, you could go to this one and learn nothing.
Well, at least in psych services. So we had them, but there's only so much room, right? There's first of all, physically only so much room in a classroom for people. Then there's only so many of us to like run them. So in reality, even though like, at least where I worked, we had some pretty, what I think are decent programs available. You have to ration it. Like that's what it is. Like people make a big deal about like, oh, you get free healthcare in prison. Well, it's rationed healthcare. It's incredibly rationed.
and it's not free.
No.
That's Bill Clinton signed US 18 something or other, $2 for every visit in the feds. If you're a federal inmate, you pay $2 for every visit, and nothing is going to happen at that visit. They're going to tell you to drink more water. I used to get, I had pen pals on the street, and people would write in and go, yeah, well, out here, at least you got free healthcare. I'm like, I don't know who told you that. I am missing 5 teeth in different places, right, that needed to be replaced, not because they rotted out, but because I had a cavity and it hurt like hell, and my options were pull the healthy tooth.
Oh yeah, they loved to pull teeth.
Well, they will not fill
That was the go-to.
Yeah,
that was the
they won't
go-to
fill
rule. I knew so many people that they just had no teeth and they were happier about it because it was that, or just be in pain with your cavities.
Yeah,
and that's at a medical center, so I don't know.
It's
I don't know what was wrong.
Well, I got to the last prison that I was at, and no joke, right? From the very first time I had gotten into the feds, I put in a request to have my teeth cleaned.
Just like cleaning.
Not joking. I am at the last prison, right? I got over a decade in the feds. And now granted, I got shipped to different places. I got out for a little bit, but I had less than 6 months left on my sentence when I finally got in there to get my teeth cleaned. And that's what starts the whole process. And I said, the cavity is killing me. I said, but I'm just going to tough this one out because I'm leaving really soon. And she's like, well, I do good work. I'm like, I don't want my tooth pulled. And she's like, oh, I'll fill it. I'm like, what?
Really?
Yeah, she did
Christmas.
4. Yeah, she did 4 fillings in one day. And she said, I can't keep working on you because I've got a bunch of people set up. She's like, there are 2 more I could fill. She said, come back tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, that's easy. I'll just, stroll on up here. And she said, no, go to the emergency room and tell them that you're dying, and they'll bring you back here, and I'll fill them. And she did. She was very, 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 very kind. Yeah, very nice woman. Nice. How do you not get emotionally involved with trying to help some of the inmates?
So you do, but you still have to have boundaries. That's the thing. And honestly, that's true of any client that you work with as a therapist. Is you have to be emotionally involved enough to care about the person for their well-being, but you also have to have your professional boundaries and keep cognizant of the fact that it's not a friendship. It's not a two-way kind of thing. It's I'm there for that person, So, but I guess to answer your question is I was very cognizant of my boundaries, and they train us very specifically on don't share any of your personal information. Don't talk about where you live. Don't talk about your family. Don't talk about any of that. But I still cared about people. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't care.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't have wanted to work there if I didn't care. And honestly, however many years it's been, since 2011, 2012, I still think about specific people I work with, and I still wonder how they did. Because every now and then, I would work with someone for a while and they would just randomly oh, Miss So-and-so released. That happens sometimes, which I guess is good. But then I would be like, hope they're okay.
Scary.
People who had specific problems, staying away from certain substances and stuff like that. And I remember one lady talked about she had been there so long she'd never been inside a Walmart. And
wow.
That's something so just we take for granted as just part of how you get by in the world.
Yep.
And that's going to be an alien on another planet. And I think that's why I like talking about this when I can, is because it's really important to me to humanize the ladies that were there, because nobody starts out life as a little toddler thinking,
I want to go to the joint.
That's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to get addicted to lots of drugs and commit lots of crimes to get money to get those drugs, because that was the majority of the people there, either for a drug charge or something they did to get drugs. And that's not something that anybody grows up wanting to do.
In the men's prison, they claim that that's an 80% number. Tampa B, good to see you. They literally claim that 80%. If you take out people who are either dealing drugs, smuggling drugs, manufacturing drugs, all that crap, or people like myself who were out stealing money to get dope, right? That makes 8 out of 10, which is pretty scary. But it's why we are 26% of the prisoners on planet Earth are in the United States of America,
Yeah.
and we're only 4% of the population, right? That's pretty jacked up.
I feel like drug treatment programs in RDAP should have been so much bigger for the
Yeah.
reasons people were there.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, it felt like trying to, I don't know, we just didn't have enough people and enough resources to help in the way that I think would have been good.
I think, Kristen, Melinda, that the carrot and the stick, right, happens to work really well with inmates. I've always seen it work when they try to implement it at, say, the local county jail, right, where they can do stuff like the unit that keeps this place the cleanest. We're going to buy 3 pizzas, right? And all of the guys can just go to town or whatever, or a mini pizza for every guy in here. And it's like, you're a grown man, right? I'm not going to go out there and start cleaning this entire freaking thing so I can get a pizza. And then, once that day rolls around, you're like, damn, I really would like a pizza, right? Yeah, the idea that you can get something there's a carrot, but more often than not, there isn't any. Right. Once you get into the actual system, there's a stick. Right? There's
if it's all
kinds
stick
of
and no carrot, how do you motivate people?
Yeah. In the state joint, if you do a program, that program will knock 120 days off your sentence, or it'll knock 30 days off your sentence, or, whatever the number is, depending on, what program. And when I went to the state place, it was a very odd system. So I had a 1 to 3. You got to do a minimum of 1, and you can't do more than 3, but they're going to decide through, other programs where the sentence is actually going to be. And when I walked in, I said to the woman, what's the fastest anybody has ever gotten out of here with this sentence? Because I intend to beat that. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to follow that dude's game plan, because I don't want to be here. But I treated that sentence a hell of a lot different than I treated the Fed. I was a counselor at a drug program. And I got to live in a single cell because I did everything right.
That's a good motivator.
That's a good motivator.
That's a good motivator.
That is a great motivator. There are people that don't, can't. There are people that really hate that isolation. I would have preferred to. I like reading. Right, everything I do, I can do alone. Might sound bad, but yeah. And I'll tell you something. The term is compromising staff. And I believe compromising staff is a 104, I think is what the level of shot is. Keeping in mind 100's killing somebody, right? So they take this pretty damn serious. And you know what? I think that every single one of the people that work there do get emotionally involved with every single person they work with. If they are putting their heart into it, doesn't mean that they're falling in love. Right. But like I had one doctor in particular. I told you guys I spent that entire month on suicide watch. She came every single day, never missed a day. And I had never been on the watch before. Right. So one day, one of the inmates. Yeah. Well, one of the inmates said to me, he goes, hey, what's the deal with you and the doc? And I'm like, no, we're going out on Friday. What the hell does that mean? Yeah. He said, well, she comes up here every day. I'm like, my understanding is that they have to come up here every day, right? They're trying to, they got to write down in their little book that I don't agree to get shipped and all this. And he goes, yeah, but it's never the same person. It'll be one of 5 people from psych. I think she just thought it was interesting. I might've been the only person that she had ever seen in that predicament or whatever. Yeah. But she was absolutely emotionally involved, and not in a bad way, right? It's like we weren't. There was no compromising staff or anything like that. But I think she was rooting for me pretty damn hard.
Yeah, you can care about someone as a human being without being compromised.
Yeah. Well, and if you're not trying to, and the other one, I worked in the kitchen, and I was in there, and my boss said to me, I got all of these papers. Can you just take these things and put them into piles that match? So just take the form, right? So all the forms that look like this, put them in one place. Most disorganized dude you ever saw in your life. And I said to him, so these are payouts, right? These are accounts receivable. These are bills. Like you don't you want me to do a little bit more than just stick this in 3 piles? I might be able to organize this. And within a week and a half, he was compromised. Just that simple. He was. Now, I didn't try to get the guy to bring dope in or anything like that, but I smoked his Newports every single day. Right.
Oh, okay.
I could smoke his cigarettes. I could cook anything I wanted in the kitchen, because I said to him, you're going to get caught. If you don't start doing these books a whole lot different, you're going to get caught. And he was like,
oh, so he appreciated it.
Yeah, he's like, you don't know what you're talking about. I can send you to the hole right now. I'm like, send me to the hole. Right. If you don't, I'll tell you how you're going to get caught, because you're screwing this up bad. And he was, but he had a deal going with the people that he was purchasing meat from. So we were on a national menu, right? So every single inmate, you probably noticed, Wednesday was hamburgers, right?
Yeah.
Thursday was chicken. It's never changes. Taco Tuesday, right? These are all the same things. Fish Friday, it always will be. And that's across the entire country. So if we're not eating, beef on a Wednesday, someone's doing something they really aren't supposed to be. But we could buy chicken patties a hell of a lot cheaper than we could buy the beef patties. And once a month, this dude would say, yeah, the truck didn't come in, whatever. And 1,400 people would eat chicken instead of beef. And you do that over the course of an entire year, and you can buy a really nice speedboat, because that's what he did with it.
Wow. The most anyone ever that I recall, I remember one of my first individual therapy clients. Like, I had like one of these Pilot gel pens. Like, they're not super fancy. They're not your $100, $200 pens, but just randomly at the end of the session asked, can I have that pen? And I was just like, no, you can't have my pen. And I think I finessed it a little more. I said, no, I wouldn't want you to get in trouble, but
she probably wanted to tattoo with it.
Yeah.
There are certain of those. Yeah.
I've been told that. At the time I was like, maybe she was just like testing me or something, but now I've learned you can actually do things with the pen. I don't.
Oh yeah. Well, and depending on, so the device that people make to put illicit substances into their vein, right? You start out with a syringe, but those don't work, 7 months in. Those are supposed to be thrown out after you use them once. And they end up getting bastardized, and they get turned into these things that they call binkies, right? Which is the ingenuity that goes into this, but you have to have a very specific kind of pen to make this happen, right? And they're usually not pens that are sold at store. So guys will always try to scam up on one of these if they can, because they'll be able to sell it to somebody for 40 or 50 bucks. If it's
now that I think about it, I think I remember my supervisor saying they can't get those at commissary. I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah. That's and the other thing, there's something about being in prison that if you can get something that nobody else has, you don't care what it is. I'm not kidding. Like, I had a cellmate that stole turtle wax from his job.
What do you do with turtle wax?
I said to him, what the hell are you going to do with an entire thing of turtle wax? I'm going to polish the toilet and sink, the metal combo.
It's going to shine.
Yeah. I said, for what friggin' reason, man? He's like, because no one else will look like that. I was like, okay, get your shine on then. Right. If it makes you happy. But he would absolutely turtle wax the toilet a couple of times a week. And there were people that freak out on their cells. There were guys that would wax the floor of their cell every single day.
Really?
Like, have a buffer on it every day. That's rugged. If my therapist keeps coming back every 2 weeks, does it mean I am a challenge, or is it something more? It's a really good question. Yes, I think we all a challenge.
You're probably is a nice on a bi-weekly schedule of seeing them. That's probably what it means. Yeah.
I really like the. It's a great comment. I dig it.
Funny.
Yeah, I started teaching early. Peer pressure is hard to understand. They believe they say no, then bugged. I arm them with knowledge. Excellent, right? It's going to sound so freaking hokey, but it really is worth saying. that we're all going to check out, right? Everyone's going to get off of this planet in a body bag, right? And they're not going to, there's no scorecard. They're not going to write
Right.
down how much money you made. They're not going to write down, how much ass you ran, how many beers you drank, none of that
Exactly.
crap. But if you positively affect, right? If you had a positive effect on a kid or somebody in need, I mean, honestly, there's just not much else you can do that means anything. But if you can do that, the earth is never the same. Like one sober mother jumper changes the entire planet.
Yeah,
It really does.
it does. It's not just them, it's everyone else they come in contact with too.
Yeah, they give birth to kids that don't know that their parent ever had a drug problem, right? It really does dramatically change the history, right? The earth will never be the same. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Tampa B says, kids learn stuff so young these days. Got to teach them younger and younger. Kind of sad, but true.
This is why you 6-year-old.
Yeah. Here's the thing. You're going to talk to your kids about dope, right? Or somebody that sells it. He's going to talk to your kids about dope. Because the people at the school, they don't do those programs anymore. Like you heard my daughter.
Not
when
even
I said, what did they say to you at school? And she said, you're the only person that's ever talked to me about fentanyl.
I wasn't, even with my career, I wasn't really aware of fentanyl to the same degree until I started watching The Boat either, which is kind of sad, but is what it is.
Well, the media tells us what they want us to hear.
Yeah, that's true.
We start looking like a third world country, right? We're this big superpower, and we're civilized to beat hell. But the number one cause of death is overdose. There's something wrong with that picture, right? Massively wrong with that picture, and it really does start making us look like a banana republic. The number of people that we incarcerate, right, for trying to change their consciousness. It's a jacked up thing to put people in prison for. It really is. It really is.
I have had to talk to like 12-year-olds about fentanyl before.
Yeah. Tell you what, though, it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, it is.
Sadly, probably no less than a dozen times. I've had people reach out to me to say my child overdosed on fentanyl last night. Right, been at least a dozen of those. I would lose count of the number of people that said I lost my significant other, boyfriend, husband, whatever. And then there were people where, there was one case that I was working with this guy because his wife had overdosed and he couldn't cope with life. And I spent a year trying to instill in him that he had a daughter that he really was going to need to. Oh, wow. But it was such a debilitating, it's a terrible, terrible disease. And it is a disease, right? No question.
Absolutely.
It is. It's a
disease.
It
changes the structure of your brain. Like like you can see that, like it actually changes brain structure. Yep. People do not behave the same way when they're in active addiction. I would even liken it a little bit to almost to Alzheimer's in some ways. People just don't behave the same way.
Right. There is a fundamental change in personality that happens. It's it's another one that you get to see an awful lot when you're incarcerated, because the people that come in, they come in two ways, right? They come in from another prison, or they're coming in straight from the street. Either way, they probably had to go to the shoe, right? They probably aren't bringing in dope too often. Most of the guys that hit the yard ended up in a fight. They didn't have time to really get things together before they got shipped out. And we'd see guys come in who were sharp as a tack, right? Mm-hmm. And you'd sit down and have fantastic conversations with these people. And then all of a sudden, you'd have the guy would start getting on dope. And, it's within 3 or 4 days, you could watch the person change. Yeah. Right, the entire personality, and if you've been to prison, you've seen the show 1,000 times. All the guys that are helping him get dope are just running up a bill in this dude's name, right? They bring him to the dope man, and that kid gets $8,000-9,000 in debt, and then they end up beating him up, right, getting him off the yard, and it's really a kill whitey kind of a thing, and it's how these people end up staying high, which is pretty scary.
That is.
Yeah, it really is. Why, thank you. I really enjoyed this episode of The Lifeboat and the guest. You were both awesome. We need to have another one sometime with this guest. Big win for you, Tommy. You know what?
Thanks.
I would love to do another show with Kristen and Melinda. We probably can work one of those out. I'm sure that there's much more that we could be talking about. Lindsay, I'm glad that you're here, and you know what?
It's good to see you, Lindsay.
It is. It's good to see you. Honestly, I'm glad that you're here. People, for better or for worse, we all of us struggle to be something that we're not, right? And it really is something where we are different. You know, they can take imaging of the brain and say this person, right? They now literally can quantify it, so to speak. The reason that nobody argues anymore about drugs or addiction in general being a disease is because the only thing that was holding it up is the same thing that's holding up fibro. Right? Fibromyalgia is real. I know so many people with fibromyalgia, and it is a absolute, debilitating, problem for so many people. But there is no test, right? There's no way to test to somebody and see if, patient A has it, patient B doesn't. And that's one of the things that they need in order to call something a disease. But,
yeah, I think it's a diagnosis of exclusion. They like to call it. They rule everything out first, and then when they can't figure out what else it could be, that's usually when they say fibro.
Say that again. Not the whole sentence, just the...
a diagnosis of exclusion.
There you go. Diagnosis of exclusion. I like that.
I paid a lot of money to learn words like that.
Well worth it. well worth it. There aren't enough wordsmiths left on the planet. It's been in decline for a really long time, and that's actually a real thing, right? The number of words that the average human being knows is decreasing with every single generation, and that's crazy, right? Doesn't make any sense. But this thing here, not great for conversation, right?
Yeah.
Has not really propelled us into more connection, right? Kind of sad, but the ultimate tool for staying in contact with all of the people that you know steals any kind of intimacy from connection.
Yeah, a text is very different.
Yeah, it really, really is. And, this is on me, but the last woman I dated, we would run into this. If you don't catch something and if you see a text 2 hours after it's been sent and you don't know what the context was, like you were in the middle, so often we would both have to say, oh no, that had nothing to do with anything like that. I was responding to, I'm to the point now where I if I'm going to text somebody, I leave a voice message. That way, at least they can hear the tone of my voice, right? They can figure out a little bit more that way, especially because it's more fun to listen to my voice when somebody decides to make a video about me instead of just holding up the screenshots, right?
The PowerPoint's not fun. Like
the whole thing
PowerPoints of everyone's text messages now.
The whole thing is fun. Well, that's very nice of you. Tampa B says Kristen is so beautiful.
Thank you, Tampa.
Awfully proud of you. For real, you have been you have really exemplified the sort of the spirit of what we do on the boat. I mean that. You're a New Year's resolution kind of girl, and there aren't too many people that still knock that out. We live in a society today where people mock those who follow through. It's astounding, but it's real. Again, it's the fabric, right? Is unraveling, and it's sad. It really is. I love this country, but it has not gone in a really beautiful direction.
No.
and that's a bit of a bummer. Well, I would love to have you back on here, Kristen, Melinda. I think this was a good time for all. A good time was had by all.
And my dog hung out the whole time. Y'all can't see him. He's down on the floor, but he's chilling.
You've
He's
had a
vibing.
dog next to you the entire
Oh,
time?
yeah. Yeah. Well, so when I first found the boat, I worked from home for the health insurance company, and I was on my computer all day long, and he just parked next to me all day. He was like, I called it working security. He was my security. He was just waiting for me to get up. Hopefully I'd give him a treat or take him on a walk on a lunch break.
That might be the right thing to do.
He's a good dog. He's a good boy.
The number of times that you have said, I remember often you in the chat saying, yeah, time to take the dog out.
Yeah. A lot of the time I'd be doing that. It's too hot to walk him during the day in the summers around here. So we would do a lot of evening walks.
Johnny's cat is, well, it's a little bit too big to be a cat, really. I mean, a kitten. She's bigger than Squirrel, and she's 8 months old. She's closing in on 12 pounds. Yeah, so Squirrel's about the 10-pound mark. She's closing in rapidly on 12 pounds, and just uncoordinated. You know what I mean?
I don't think Katie knows how big she is. I don't think she knows.
No, she doesn't.
She still tries to do little cat things.
She runs under things at top speed and hits them. Like she is a wildly uncoordinated kitten. And I know she's going to grow into those huge feet and all of that. But for the time being, there's just something about, not too many people have had a kitten that's about 12
she's so pretty.
12 pounds.
She's so soft.
Yeah, she has and it was really weird when he first brought her home. She
was tiny in the early pictures. She was teeny.
Her fur was, I mean, as soft as anything you've ever felt. Like it didn't even feel real. It was like silky almost. And the first time we went over to look, because Johnny had looked at a couple of different Maine Coons, but the first time we went over there to look at Katie, she was probably 4 or 5 weeks earlier than what you all saw. And she was, I mean, she was just a little ball of fluff, but you could look at her feet and know that,
the cats and dogs with the feet, you can tell they're going to be huge.
My mother tells the story of my birth. And she said that the doctor said, this one's going to be a big dog. My mother said, "What?
Like the Saint Bernard paws?"
Yeah, he said, "Wait till you get a look at the paws on this puppy." And, I've been taking crap for the large hands ever since. Yes, Maine Coons are lovable. Kitties for the win. Yeah, there really is. You have a 25-pound guy. Good Lord!
I bet Katie will get that big.
Katie should get that big. She absolutely has the potential to be that big a kitty. Whether or not she'll max that out, I mean, there's not much of a problem in terms of her dad feeding her. I promise you, he's not doing much to say no to Katie. She's got him wrapped around her paw. I promise you. Good Lord,
52 pounds.
My Maine Coon was
more than my child.
Pounds.
That's heavier than my 6-year-old child.
Yeah, I'm leaving that up there because that is just
that's pretty epic.
I've seen some really, really huge ones in my time. There was one at a garage in Texas. I brought my car in, and I didn't think it was real. You know what I mean? It was this thing, it was a tabby, and it had to be 4.5 feet long, and it was crashed out right next to the cash register. And
tiny lion.
Yeah, and I just thought, it had to be stuffed. I mean, it wasn't moving. The tail wasn't moving. And then as I got a little bit closer, did one of these numbers. I was like, holy hell, that's the biggest cat I've ever seen. And he said, yeah, it's a Maine Coon. I'd never heard any of that. Like I didn't even know the breed existed. I think I was 18 at the time. And I just said, so there's a cat that grows bigger than normal cats? Gotta get one of those. Trouble is, you know what? And it's a good thing, but my cats live a long time, right? So I'm not one of those guys that can get 25 cats because they really live a long time with me.
Y'all take really good care of them. It's
we do love the animals. If if you're a cat in the Scoville house, you're in pretty good shape. And I'll tell you what, if you're a cat in the next Scoville house, wait until you see the new place. It is.
Exciting.
Let's just say this: we absolutely discussed had a long conversation about which home would be the best fit for the cats. I
They're
absolutely mean
apart,
that.
the picture. Is there room
Yeah.
for a cat wheel, though? That's important.
Yes, there is absolutely room for a cat wheel. I'd like one room to just be
Just
for
cat
kitties.
stuff. Oh, that'd be so cool. Like the
Yeah,
cat jungle gym playground.
yeah, little ball pit, not on the ground, but in a little
Awesome.
so that they can you can throw things in there and watch them dive into ball pits. They love ball pits.
Oh, that'd be
Uh,
awesome.
cat climbs on the walls. Absolutely, we're gonna
Just have
you
like a
put
string
carpet up.
going in there all the time, like to watch the cats. That's
Or
so
the little red
uplifting.
laser ball. I mean, the little
Yes.
red laser light. Get it? That thing. Watch them disappear under the balls. All righty. I thank you so much for doing this, Kristen,
Thanks for
Melinda.
having me. It's been
It
fun.
I'm embarrassed that it took this long to get put together. I really am. But this was a lot of fun, and it's always nice to reminisce. Believe it or not, I really do like to. The farther you get away, the more you can forget. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And it's pretty healthy that I don't forget. It's kind of a big deal. Once I start forgetting, I'm usually on my way to go on back, and
Yeah.
I have no desire to ever spend another minute behind bars. It's not on my bingo card. All righty, peoples. Between now and the next time I see you, reduce a little bit of harm and don't look for happiness the same place you lost it. I am Tommy. That's Kristen, Melinda, the best guest I've had on the lifeboat, and I don't remember how long. I really
Thank you.
this was
Thank you.
great. Thank you. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. I got by the way, just a real quick, I told you so. Remember all the people that said that nothing about Diddy? Yeah, yeah. So today, Diddy's employees, right, started to take the stand. The first one got up there as personal assistant and started to prove the elements of RICO. This guy's not going to get out. And I hate to say I told you so. You know I hate that. But I
Whenever I
told you
hear
so.
that, I can't help but think of cough drops. I think of the guy singing Ricola. Sorry.
Yeah, I can see
Yeah.
that.
Every
I
time.
absolutely can see that. I use that all the time, by the way. And one last, I don't think, new member. I didn't get a chance to do this. Timothy
Yay!
Glass, you look fantastic in green. I mean that. And thanks again to Jim Webster. Jim, you're an ace. All right, people, we will see you on the next one. God bless. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Do-do-do.